Welcome to The Explainer. We're about to dive into a really counterintuitive idea from our source material. Get this. What if the best way to help students who are struggling is to stop focusing on them and instead pour all our resources into the students at the very top?
I mean, this is the question in education, right? It's what every school system on the planet is trying to solve. And the usual answer, the one that feels right, is to give more support, more money, more attention directly to the kids who need it most.
But the source we're looking at today takes that entire idea and just flips it completely on its head. It gives an answer that honestly feels totally backward at first.
Yep, you heard that right. The core argument we're exploring is that to lift up the bottom, you have to aim for the top. It's a huge paradox, and to even begin to understand it, our source material points us to a fascinating real-world showdown.
So, let's head to Asia and look at two educational powerhouses that have taken completely different roads, Taiwan and Singapore.
Okay, so on one side you have Taiwan. Their approach, which the source calls egalitarianism, is all about spreading the wealth, trying to give every student an equal shot. Then you've got Singapore, which does the exact opposite. They focus their resources, laser-like, on their highest-achieving students.
And look at the money behind these philosophies. Taiwan's education budget is massive, nearly 3 times bigger than Singapore's. So you'd think, with all that extra cash and a focus on equality, their outcomes would be way better, especially for students who are behind.
Which leads to the million-dollar question, or in this case, the billion-dollar question. All that extra funding, that focus on equality, surely that means Taiwan is doing a better job of closing the achievement gap, right? Well, the data in our source tells a very, very different story.
5 times. Let that sink in. According to the data presented in the source, the math achievement gap, the difference between the top and bottom students, is 5 times wider in Taiwan than it is in Singapore. So the country spending way less money and focusing on its elites actually has a much smaller divide. How does that happen?
Well, this leads to the source's most shocking claim, that Taiwan's well-intentioned egalitarian approach hasn't just failed to help underperforming students, it's actually become their biggest victimizer. It might have hurt the very kids it was designed to save. But how on earth could that be possible?
All right, Section 2, the problem with mediocrity. To understand this, the source material offers a diagnosis, and it all comes down to a single cultural idea.
The source identifies this concept it calls平庸主義, which translates to mediocrityism. The argument goes like this. When an education system stops celebrating excellence and instead tries to make everyone the same, it kind of weakens the motivation for anyone to excel.
And this allegedly creates a vicious cycle. First, you establish this culture of mediocrity. If soaring high isn't the goal, then why would a struggling student feel any real push to catch up? They lose that drive, they fall even further behind, and eventually they leave school without the skills they desperately need.
And the source argues this isn't just a theory. It points to public statements like this one from a former education official. The full context suggests that telling kids success is all about hard work can be a mistake. Now, the source is really critical of this, asking, what kind of message does that send? Does it tell kids that their own effort doesn't matter as much as other things?
So this whole cultural argument then feeds into a much, much bigger idea about society. Because if focusing on the top helps students, does it, as the source argues, also help the entire nation? Okay, I know what you're probably thinking, because it's the obvious question. Isn't this just unfair? I mean, how can you justify pouring resources into a select few and say it's good for everybody? Well, the source answers that by pointing to people like these, absolute titans. The argument is that society isn't pushed forward by averages, it's launched into the future by a few exceptional people. Without Steve Jobs, there's no Apple. No Morse Chang, no TSMC. No Jensen Huang, no NVIDIA. And that's the heart of the lift all boats argument. The idea is that cultivating this top-tier talent isn't just about them. It's about creating entire industries, millions of jobs, and economic power that raises the tide for the whole country. The immense value they create is supposed to trickle down and benefit everyone.
So, after comparing these two countries and diagnosing the supposed problem, what's the final takeaway from our source material here? What's the proposed path forward?
And here it is. We've come full circle. The source's ultimate conclusion is that, as paradoxical as it sounds, the best way to help underperforming students is to do what Singapore does, adopt an elite-focused model. It's a bold claim, and definitely a controversial one.
And that really leaves us with this one big question. At the end of the day, what is education for? Is the goal to raise the floor, to make sure everyone gets a basic foundation? Or is it to lift the ceiling, to push the absolute limits of what's possible by investing in our brightest minds? The source we've unpacked today makes one thing clear. It argues that by trying to lift that ceiling, you might just end up raising the whole floor higher than you ever imagined.